direction. Just look around and find at least something good. All you need will come to you. I'll never end your stare.
Welcome back to the Two Canadians at Kafe Lise, a Vigor podcast. I'm Dr. Anton,
And I'm DJ Spencer.
and we're your hosts, and welcome to episode 3 of the podcast. This is going to be a little bit different one because the PlayStation version is just released, and so we're doing a little special welcome to the PlayStation players, I should say, PlayStation players, and we wanted to do a bit of getting to know Vigor. Sort of almost like a tutorial in a way, but not really a tutorial, just talking about what to expect when playing Vigor for the first time, or even as you're playing, things that'll come up, that just trying to give you a few heads up. How's that sound? Yeah. But yeah, so again, welcome all the new players. It's great to see you. We hope you're really enjoying the game. If you've started, if you're just getting ready to start, then you have a lot to look forward to. It's a fantastic game and we love it. But yeah, we just wanted to just go out and start this for you. But yeah, so the first thing we're going to talk about is what to expect when you start playing Vigor. Like, what's it going to be like? DJ, did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, the core mission is essentially to survive. So,
Yeah.
you go into the encounters, you get kills, but really in the beginning, your main goal is to get resources. So you want to focus on looting, to build up your shelter by upgrading your crafting tables and various other aspects of your shelter, which we'll go through later on. So maybe not focusing on kills at the beginning, but focusing on the upgrades.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of losing your guns if you go into an encounter, but at the same time, survival is key, really, because you want to go in and out as often as possible with as much resources as you can.
Yeah. As you start out, you're really going to find out that things are very limited at first. That's true. You're only going to have maybe a couple plans for guns because everything you want to build in this game requires a plan, like a blueprint, I guess you could say. And that's exactly what they're called. They're called plans and blueprints. But every gun that you find in the game has an associated blueprint for it. But it's going to take you a while to accumulate all these different blueprints. So when you start out, you'll have a couple different ones. You're going to have the PM pistol, and you will get the Thompson submachine gun. And so those are the two basic weapons that you can get. And there's a number of different categories of weapons. They start as a common, they're like different rarities almost. There's common, uncommon, rare, military, and special issue. And so there's different guns in all of those. The guns you start with are all common. A lot of the guns you're going to find as you're playing the game are going to be of the various rarities, but you will find more common guns than you do the rarer ones. But don't be afraid to lose your guns as you play the game. It's especially if you're going in and being cautious at first. It's really easy to pick up new guns and start building your, I guess, inventory, your stockpile of weapons. It might seem a little daunting at first, but it won't take you long, and then you'll have a plethora of choices as you go.
Yeah, exactly. So and it's all about familiarity with your gun. So as you start gathering weapons and stuff like that, you want to find a gun that works to you. There are some that are like that are pretty strong. Like the AKM, the M2 carbine, the ES16. Like for commons, those are really good guns to start off with, but they may not work for you. So you go out to the shooting range or the target range in your shelter, and you could find out which guns work for you, and you can bring them into the encounters. But again, like you mentioned, Doc, you want to kind of build up your resources and your inventory and get those crafting plans so you can craft better weapons
Yeah,
and be more prepared.
absolutely. And that sort of leads us into our kind of our next topic, um, your shelter. So when you start the game up for the first time, it's going to ask you if you want to go through the tutorial or not. Basically, what the tutorial is going to do for you is it just takes you through the basics of playing the game. So you have like a little scenario you'll go through. You start out, you sort of wake up in this tunnel. You'll go. The game will teach you how to crouch, how to jump, all that kind of things. Eventually, it'll have you picking a few things up. Have you pick up a gun, and then when you get to the end of the tutorial, you've basically done some of the really minor stuff that you will do in an encounter, and then you'll encounter some radiation at the end, and that's sort of a thing that happens at the end of an encounter. As the encounter's winding down, radiation starts coming in. So at the very end of the tutorial, you'll encounter a little bit of radiation, but it's not anything to worry about. It's like the very end, and it's sort of a timed thing. So it's not timed, but it's triggered by distance. When you get to a certain point in the tutorial, that's when the radiation kicks in. You could run around the whole map of the tutorial for as long as you want, and the radiation won't kick on. When you get to a certain point, then the radiation is just all of a sudden kicks on. I tested this on the PlayStation myself when I did my tutorial, just to see, how long can I stay out here? And the radiation, even though at one point she does sort of warn you a little bit about it, saying the radiation's coming. It doesn't
Yeah.
actually come until you hit like the bridge. There's a bridge at the end of the tutorial. You hit that bridge, a little alarm goes off, and then the radiation sound. It's like a Geiger counter sound
Yeah.
starts going off, and then that's when you start feeling the effects of the radiation. But at that point, you're right at the exit anyway, so you're not going to, in the tutorial, you're not going to die from radiation unless you really wanted to. If you wanted to stick around and potentially die to the radiation, you could, but whatever. But whether you go through the tutorial or not, um, when you start the game, at the end of the tutorial, or if you bypass it, you'll start at your shelter. And your shelter is this sort of area that it's a fairly large area, really. It's sort of like on the kind of almost like part of a cliff, but it also goes down to the water. It's really nice. It has like some springs that goes through it. It's like you're running around an actual little spot. There'll be notable things all around your shelter. You'll say, oh, there's all these things that you don't know what they'll mean at first. And it's like, oh, this is box of plants, even though there's no box of plants there. This is log, even though there's no log there, that kind of thing. So you won't understand what any of this is at first. But then as you're going through, um, the game, even though if you skip the tutorial, will still have you do certain challenges. And the game pops up and tells you what these things are. But they'll have you do certain challenges. And as you do those challenges, it teaches you about the game regardless, right? They're really good to do because you'll get good rewards for doing those challenges. The rewards can be guns and ammo. Sometimes it could be crowns, which is the currency they use in the game, or it could be crates, different types of crates and all these crates are like loot crates that you'll open up and you'll get usually three random items out of the crate uh, based on, and when you're looking through the list of crates, it'll be like on the side, it'll show you what you can potentially get out of that crate. As you open the crate, it'll check off three of those things, and then you'll get those three things, and then continue on. You open another crate of the same type, three more check marks will happen. So yeah, so doing those tutorial challenges are really important. The thing about challenges, you'll get daily challenges, and once you do those daily challenges, that'll be it for the day for those ones. And at the I think I'm not sure if it's midnight or depending on where you are, it's going to be a time around midnight where those reset every day. These tutorial challenges, they sort of keep going. So you finish a tutorial challenge, a new one will pop up right away, and then until you've gone through all of them. And we're not sure how many there are. There's quite a few. But yeah, that's an important thing is do the challenges because you'll get really good rewards for doing them.
Yeah, and you get a lot of XP doing them as well.
Yeah.
That helps level you up in the battle pass as well. So that's another thing you want to look at upgrading or moving along, progressing, I should say, is the battle pass because you do get some good items from the battle pass.
Right. Yeah, because the battle pass, there's two levels to the battle pass. There's the free level that everybody gets, and then there's the paid level, I guess,
Premium,
the premium level. Yeah,
yes.
with crowns, I think it's 690 crowns. You can unlock the premium level, and you can unlock the premium level at any time. So if you say went through Vigor and played levels 1 through all the way to level 50 is where the battle pass ends. If you decide at level 50, oh, you know what, I want the stuff from the premium, and it's mostly cosmetic stuff out of the premium. You do get some crowns out, some additional crowns out of it, but a lot of it is cosmetics. But you'll also get a few weapons plans from doing the
Yeah,
pass. So it's not that
and
you
you do get the XP boosters as well.
yes, you get XP boosters. So that's sort of an incentive to try to unlock the premium battle pass a bit earlier than say waiting to level 50, because there's various XP boosts you'll get, and eventually you could be at the point where you're getting a 210% boost in XP from just by unlocking all those, which will help you get through those last few levels quicker with that extra XP. So
Yeah,
the battle pass is the free one is great because you get crates and weapons and crowns out of them. But the extended one's nice because you get some nice cosmetics and that kind of thing out of it.
yeah. And like today we're recording and it's December 12th.
Yeah.
And I believe there's 31 days left in the battle pass. Like there's still lots of time uh, to get that battle pass done.
Yeah,
So
if you're
I would
committed,
still
you should still be able to do it for sure. Because it
yeah,
came out, was it about 30 days ago? Was it a month ago when it first came out?
yeah, roughly.
Roughly a month from now, and DJ's finished it on the Xbox, and I'm close to
Yeah,
finishing it on the Xbox. So if you and we play, 2 to 3 hours a night kind of thing. DJ plays typically four nights a week. I typically play 5 nights a week,
yeah,
maybe some a bit on the weekends. So it's definitely possible to finish the battle pass in the time you have left, for sure.
yeah, exactly.
Um, so we talked about the battle pass. We've talked about doing the daily challenges. So now I guess we could talk a little bit about shelter and upgrades of the shelter.
Yeah. So uh, the very first shelter upgrade you get to do is your crafting table. And as Doc previously mentioned, that's where you get to craft all your weapons, your consumables, as long as you have those plans, the crafting plans. So what you want to try to focus on is upgrading your crafting table as quickly as possible, but also um, trying to build up your food production because at your shelter you could actually donate food up to 10,000 a week, and you get crates out of these donations at the end of every week. And this gives you an opportunity to gather those crafting plans for weapons or consumables. So that's another thing you want to focus on is your rat traps and your box of plants.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and then there's also the water distillation, which decreases the crafting time for your consumables, and the utility room, which lowers the cost of your consumables. So those kind of go hand in hand. In the end, like if you max out your water distillation, you could instantly craft any consumable. And you look at the more experienced players that have it, like they could instantly craft a portable or an armor plate. Things that are like really desired with the more aggressive players. Because you go in with that added protection, or if you have portables, you could find out where people are.
Yeah,
Um,
portable signals.
I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Portable signal. Sorry, I'm using short term. Maybe I should spell
Yeah.
it out more for you. You almost forget that there's a whole new player base, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that it's not crossplay, but hopefully down the line, there will be some crossplay between both consoles. Um, so for me, those are the main ones you want to look at upgrading. The wood log 2 is also kind of good because you do need some materials to actually craft your basic weapons and consumables. Um, but I don't know, Doc. Do you have anything else to add, or
Yeah, because well, I guess we could touch on that a little bit too. So guns, consumables, and ammo are all made out of this generic material called just materials. And materials can be actually the only way to get materials. There's two ways to get materials. One is, like as you said, the wood log and the box of herbs both create materials for you. So it's like every hour, each of those things will generate materials, and then within the wood log typically takes about a day before it's maxed out, and then it's not producing anymore. So you have within a
yeah,
day to pick up whatever it's produced. So anything that you have around your shelter that produces something, you have to manually go to that location and pick it up to clear it out so that you don't, you're not missing out on additional materials or whatever else. But yeah, the wood log and the box of herbs produce materials, which lets you make guns and all that. The other way to get materials is to deconstruct, um, and that's where you have to have your crafting table. You have to even progress in your shelter. You have to start with at least a level one crafting table. So you're going to have a crafting table in short order. It won't take you'll have one right away. Um, Getting it up as high a level as you can as quickly as you can is nice because then it as you find gun plans, you won't be limited by what level your table is because certain gun plans require your table to be at a certain level in order for you to make those weapons. Ammo doesn't matter as long as you have the plans for a gun that uses the ammo. You can always make ammo regardless of the level of your table. I'm pretty sure on that.
yeah.
Yeah. But then the other things, so that's materials. But then the other things that you will find in raid, or not in raid, in encounters, all the other types of um, goods, I guess you could say, or loot that help you do other things. Because everything that you're doing in the shelter requires some kind of specialized loot. So metal parts is one of the common ones, just generic metal parts. There's electronics, and it's all generic kind of names. It's like metal parts, electronics, chemicals, um, fuel. Um, what else is there? Wire, nails, that kind of thing. So these are all things that you're going to find in encounters. And as you build your shelter up, certain areas of your shelter might produce some of this. Like there's like a metal bin that can produce metal for you. That's one of the ones that it gets to a point where it costs more metal to upgrade it than you're going to get out of it in any kind of reasonable time frame. So the metal bin isn't one of the most effective ones, but it is definitely one of the ones you can do. But for the most part, materials or I keep saying materials, but it's goods. I guess it's
Resources.
resources. Resources. Thank you. That's the word. Resources. I couldn't remember what they called it. Like it's not like just goods. It's not loot. It's
Yeah,
resources.
yeah,
The resources mainly you're getting out of encounters. And in an encounter, there'll be like all these different types of containers. There'll be like um, tool chests. There'll be drawers in houses or whatever that you're going to get goods out of. Glass is another one of them.
yeah.
Fertilizer is another. So you'll collect all this stuff, bring it back to your shelter. As when you exit an encounter alive, you'll bring all this stuff that you found in the encounter back to your shelter, and then you'll use that to build the additional upgrades, all the different upgrades for your shelter. They all require different resources that you will find in game. And then your shelter has levels too. So your shelter starts out like really ratty and like holes everywhere, and it looks pretty bad. As you build more improvements, your shelter will start looking nicer and nicer. And then as you go, you're going to have more improvements built to get your shelter to the different levels and to unlock different improvements. So that's, yeah, it's sort of all, I don't know what you call it, if it's like cyclical or if you want to call it, it's all interconnected.
Yeah.
To improve your shelter, you got to build improvements. To build improvements, you got to get resources and and spend time, because each one takes so much time before you can build a new one. Yeah.
And I just got to say, I found out this week, uh, unfortunately for the new players on PlayStation, your basic shelter does not include the arcade game on the top floor. So for me, that would be my number one priority is upgrade your shelter as quickly as possible so you could play the arcade game on the second floor of your shelter, which I don't remember. Someone had showed it, but I think it might be like shelter level 7 or something like that is when it actually gets
It's
introduced.
about midway, I think. Like when you get
Yeah.
midway upgraded your shelter, like for where it's, when you see, you'll understand what I'm talking about when you see it. But it's like a progression chart or
Yeah.
path. And when you get about midway down that path and your shelter's about halfway or so, that's when this arcade box unlocks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it and for those PlayStation players who are new to Vigor, uh, the arcade has always been there, um, but this is the first season that it's actually been playable. So,
Yeah.
and I've had a lot of fun with it, to be honest.
Yeah. And it's just a
I know some people
basic,
don't like it as much, but it's fun.
yeah, and it's just a basic Connect 5 style game, but it's hard. It's definitely hard. And it's enjoyable, and it's also, depending on the area you're in, sometimes encounters usually go fairly quick. Like you when you're queuing up for an encounter, we're both in Canada, in North America, um, and I rarely have to wait very long to get into encounters, but I do know there are some regions where, depending on the time of day, there may not be as many people playing in your area, and so sometimes it can take a few minutes to get into an encounter.
Yeah,
So having something like the arcade is kind of nice. That way you can play
yeah,
the game as you're waiting to get in. Yeah,
yeah. And there's also the Rubik's Cube too,
yeah,
if you want to waste time as well.
yeah. There's a Rubik's cube. There's medal. Like any game, as you do different things within the game, you'll get medals, right? Like achievements. There's an achievement if you solve the Rubik's cube, and you
Yes.
don't have to necessarily do it legitimately. You can use various websites to help you solve it. But
Yeah.
if you're someone who's really into Rubik's cubes, you can play around with it, shuffle it up, and try to solve it.
Yeah. Um,
Let's see what else is there.
so we talked about the upgrades
Hmm.
that you needed to do, the resources you need to gather to build those upgrades. Um, I guess we could talk next about what actually happens in an encounter.
Yeah, that'd be good. Just a brief talk about, yeah, what happens when you go into an encounter. Because yeah, when you're not sure, there's going to be a lot of things happening to you that you won't understand when you first get in there. So how the game is laid out, there's three choices of what map you want to go into. Two of those are random. So there's like a left and right. Um, they're like two different queues. There'll be two maps. They'll have different timers underneath them saying how long is left before that map goes away and a new map takes its place. And then there's a third map, which is the featured map, and that one's always available. So you can always go to the featured map um, without having to wait. Well, there might still be a queue time to get into it if there's not a lot of people going there, but that's it. You have three different maps to choose from. You'll choose one of those maps, and then queue up. And then once the server gets enough players, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a full lobby, but I think it has a minimum it's looking for. So it may take a couple minutes if it hasn't reached its
Yeah.
minimum. It'll take you to the lobby, which will show you all the players who are going or loading into that map. It has everybody's pictures, based on whatever outfit they're playing. their names, their levels. You can look at what their loadout is, just their guns though. You can't see what's in their backpacks, but it'll show you what guns they're carrying. It'll give you the option for doing boosts, and there's three types of boosts. There's loot boosts, meaning there'll be more or greater quantities of resources to be found on the map. There's a crate boost, meaning the crate is something you can find. There's an airdrop that happens close to the end of the match, and when the airdrop comes, it'll have a common crate, which is those same ones that you'll open up in your shelter. But you can boost it so that it's a higher level crate. You can go all the way up to special, or potentially have multiple crates in the airdrop. And then the last boost is insurance. Insurance is a thing you can put on. It affects the team. So if you're playing by yourself, it's just for you. If you're playing with a friend and you're doing duos or trios, it affects all of you. And so only one person has to pay for the insurance. But what insurance does is if you die in the encounter, you'll come back out with your load, like all your weapons and everything that was in your backpack, with the exception of a crate. If you found the crate in the game, like from the airdrop, that's the only thing that's not insured. Everything else that you find is insured if you have insurance. Insurance is one of those things that it's a little expensive. It costs 60 crowns to insure. So it's like, do I want to insure or don't I? I, for the most part, don't insure unless the lobby's been boosted a few times. That way I know, okay, there's going to be a lot of good loot out there. Like I'm going to grab as much as I can, and I don't want to take any chances if I die of losing it. So then I'll buy insurance. But on just a regular game, I won't buy insurance because typically, like, it's not hard to find guns in this game, and eventually you're going to get to at the beginning. It might seem it's all feast or famine, but eventually, when you get to a certain point, you're going to have lots of guns to choose from. So so it's going to be the point where you want to wonder, is it really worth getting insurance? And like I said, I like to wait until there's a few boosts, and then maybe I'll get insurance. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a great strategy. I never even thought about that until like I started playing with you.
Mm-hmm.
Was there'd be like a triple boost on the loot, and you'd put your insurance, and I wondered why, and you explained it to me like you just did, and it's fantastic because like I don't know how many times you go into an encounter, you get a bunch of loot, and if you die,
you come out with
it's
nothing.
gone.
Yeah.
And in the case where you buy the insurance, all those resources you get to actually keep.
Mm-hmm.
And like I mentioned earlier on, like if you're playing this game and you're worried about losing weapons, like in my mind, like the weapons shouldn't matter, especially early on. You need to focus on those resources like I mentioned, because once you build up your shelter to a certain level, it doesn't matter what guns you have because you could craft whatever you want.
Yep.
And so spending that insurance money for the resources instead of like worrying about just losing your weapon is way better, is a better return on your investment.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
Is spending that money to ensure that you keep those resources.
Mm-hmm. And as you play the game, you're probably going to notice in lobbies people who go in with nothing, like they don't take any weapons in. And you might think, well, that's odd, but no, not really. They're just hoping to get some loot and get out. Maybe they're not looking to get into any fights. They just want to grab whatever they can and maybe get out. And that is definitely a good strategy. You can find weapons in the game as well. So like most maps will have somewhere in them some weapon crates, and there won't be fantastic weapons or anything. Usually they'll be like basic weapons. But it's a weapon, and usually be some ammo for it as well. So you can find weapons and ammo in an encounter, and then some of the special areas in the game can have good weapons and ammo. But there's like the basic weapon crates you can find here and there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the initial things you're going to encounter. It's the lobby where everybody's loading in. You can ready up, just meaning you're good to go. I'm not sure why they have that in there, because it almost, if everybody readies up, the game will load a bit faster. It rarely ever happens that you get a full lobby readied up. Um, Maybe it's just some people want a little extra time to go get a drink or something as the
Yeah,
game's loading, so they don't ready up and let it go the full 30 seconds or whatever it takes for the lobby to load. And I get it. That could be, that could be valid. It might be frustrating for the people who are waiting. I just want to go in, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. But once everyone's readied up, or once the timer is counted down, the game will load. And the first thing that happens when it loads, your map will show up. It'll just give you a brief, it shows you the full map. There'll be symbols on the map. You won't know what they are. Um, you're probably going to spawn close to an exit. Most spawn points are near an exit of some type. There are a few that may be a little bit farther away from one, but it doesn't usually take you long to get to an exit if you need to. And exits are all marked by these orange, sort of like campsite looking kind of symbols showing that this is your exit. And there's usually several per map. So like 6 to 7 or so per map. Maybe a fewer if it's a smaller map. But they'll be like,
Yeah, like
yeah.
Anakin has four, I believe,
Um,
just in the corners.
Might be 5, but yeah, no, you're right. It is might be less. The batteries. There's all these different maps. There's these
Yeah,
ones called batteries. They're a smaller map as well, so they only have about 4 or 5 as well. But some of the bigger maps can have 6 or 7. Some of the really big maps. Also on your there's going to be all these locations of interest that you won't have discovered yet. So as you run around, it'll say you've discovered this location, and then on your map it'll be filled in, so you'll know the name of it. There'll be special symbols on your map. There'll be symbols for areas of interest, like one called the Bard House. There's also recently added in the time safe and the container, and then you'll see symbols for different towers. Like there's comm stations. Comm stations are used to affect the airdrop that's going to come near the end of the match. So you can buff or debuff that drop based on a comm station, and as you use the comm station, it describes what each thing will do, whichever one you choose. Once 4 choices have been made, the comm stations will stop to work, whether they're buffs or debuffs. And when the plane's about to arrive, they'll stop working. And then the other types of things there are is a signal tower. If you go to the signal tower and use it and look at your map, you'll see where everybody who is currently on the map is. It'll show you where everyone is briefly, just for a few seconds, kind of thing. And new this season was added the disruptive tower. It's sort of like when you use it, it makes a big area of no signals. It sort of blocks the whole area, so no one can see where anything is, or scan to see where anybody is in that area, and that lasts about 30 seconds or so. So those are the different symbols you're going to see on your map. Um, yeah. Anything you wanted to add?
Uh, no, that covered up pretty much all the symbols.
Yeah, that pretty much covered the symbols.
We could talk next about what you find in the game. So uh, while you're looting, you might find a picture.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like an old school Polaroid. These are cache spots on the map. Uh, the more experience or the more you play, you'll kind of recognize the areas on the map.
Yeah.
And these could contain um, some weapons, sometimes some ammo and some weapon parts and some resources, consumables. So it's really good to find out where those locations are, um, because it comes to the point where you'll actually know where the cache spots are.
And you can potentially find them without having the picture.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Because you may spawn near one and you'll check it out quickly, right? Without having the picture. Because you don't need the picture, like you mentioned, uh, to have it.
yeah.
Um,
The picture is just going to tell you where the one cache spot is in the match for that game, because there could be a dozen or so different potential cache spots. The picture is pointing out which one actually has loot. But if you know where
yeah.
cache spots are, like DJ was mentioning, you can go up to it and check it to see if there's anything in it. If it happened to be the right one. Most of the time it's not going to be, but on occasion you get lucky and you find the cache without having the picture. Yep.
Yeah. And I don't even know how many cache spots there are
There's quite
per
a few.
map. Like
There's quite a few.
it yeah, like it's countless. Like it's got to be like in the 20s probably per map,
Yeah,
something like
maybe.
that.
Yeah, it's and even though we've been playing for months, and there'll be sometimes a picture will show up. It's like I don't know where this is.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
have an idea where it could be. So you might go to a certain area because you think you know some of the geography, but yeah, it takes you a while to really get. And some of them you'll pick up right away. And it's like, oh, this house, I recognize this house. I know where to go. If it's really
Like
if a really specific one like that.
exactly. Um, and then another thing I would suggest too for newer players, kind of along the lines of the cache spots and kind of familiarizing yourself with map, is you need to find out where like the good floor loot is.
Hmm.
Because if you think about chemicals, uh, they're very valuable when it comes to shelter upgrades. Especially if you're trying to focus on your water distillation, that requires thousands of chemicals
Hmm.
towards the end. Um, and you want to go to maps where where you could find not just a couple, but like a large number of chemicals. And like I think of Sawmill or Sogbrook, which is what it's named now.
Yeah.
Um, you go along the shoreline and there's a bunch of chemicals at a few spots. So like you need to learn the maps and find. You basically have to look everywhere, pretty much, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Um,
no, leave no container unturned. I guess you could say, look
exactly,
in everything. Yeah.
exactly, because it could be anywhere. Like it could be in a container, like you said. It could be in a vehicle. It could be
Yep.
just laying down on the ground. With no container. Like chemicals will show up as a regular bottle at some
Chemicals,
points.
yeah, fuel, fertilizer, they all will be the kinds of things you can find lying on the ground. Some maps will have food, like if you find bushes
Yep.
that it can be interacted with, and there'll be food. It's like, oh, great, there's some food I can pick up. Yeah, so just look for those little dots, because especially if you don't turn it off, the little dots indicate there's something you can interact with. You run up to that, and then you'll be able to pick it up or something, and that it's going to be some kind of loot. And you'll as you play, you'll learn what type of containers contain what. So like you go into a house and you open a drawer, most likely you're going to find glass. Sometimes you might find some fertilizer, but glass is the most common thing you'll find in just a regular drawer. You go into a kitchen, you'll probably find glass, but you'll also find potentially knives, knives which can be used as weapons. No one uses knives, but
No.
you can find them, and then that could go in the whole thing. Whereas never, try not to leave an encounter with an empty spot. Picking up a knife, you have 4 weapon spots. 2 of them are like your big weapons, like it could be assault rifles or shotguns or whatever. And
Yeah,
then 2 of
like your
them are
primaries.
your primaries, and then 2 of them are like your secondaries, which are like
Yeah.
pistols, really small submachine guns, and knives. So if you try to fill up all your different spots when you leave an encounter, even if you're never going to use a knife in an encounter, eventually you can deconstruct that knife and have materials to use for building better weapons. So
Exactly.
it's always a good rule of thumb. Try to, if you're going for loot, try to pick up as much as you can and fill every spot. You will notice as you pick up more stuff, weapons and resources, you have 2 bars. One's your health bar, and one is your stamina bar. As you pick up more, your stamina bar is going to have it's going to be shorter. It's going to be like a bunch of crossed out part at the end of it, meaning that you're carrying a lot. You're heavy, and so your stamina won't last as long as you're running. That kind of thing. So as you pick up more loot, that stamina is going to go, and so you'll know if you're doing really well. If you have a lot of stamina missing, you say, okay, I've picked up a lot. I better
Yeah.
leg it out of here.
And you want to avoid that middle exit on Grontheim because you have to make 2 jumps with all that loot.
Yeah,
And
so
it's a lot harder when you don't have full stamina.
yeah, most exits are pretty simple. You just run to the
Yeah.
exit. You're always going to see the painted symbols near an exit, so you can run right to them. And then once you hit the exit, the countdown will start. And as long as that countdown started, if there's radiation happening, you even if it looks like you're still dying from the radiation, if that countdown's going, you're not going to die. There's
Yeah.
one like he was mentioning, Grontheim Valley. It's a long map, and at the very middle of that map, there's one exit. And to get to that exit, you have to climb up ladders. And there's like 2 big ladders you have to climb up. Once you get to the top of the ladders, you have to run across a wood bridge. But there's 2 big gaps in that wood bridge. And if you don't jump quite right, you're going to fall.
Yeah.
And you could potentially die. I don't think I've ever died from falling unless my health is low because of the radiation. Then it's a really good chance of dying. But if you have full health and you jump and you miss, you're probably not going to die, but you're going to get hurt, and then you have to try again. So those are really
Yeah.
tricky. You have to do some practicing. If you're overweight, it's not the best one to try because I think your jump distance isn't going to be as good. But if you're not overweight, put your and you holster your gun. Um, you have a better chance of making that jump, and then there's a second jump you have to make, and then you get to the point where it starts to extract you. So that's the trickiest exit in the game. Every other exit's pretty straightforward. You run to that exit, and then eventually the countdown will start. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's definitely one you kind of want to learn how to avoid if possible.
yeah, yeah.
But
Even
practice.
even after playing for months, I rarely ever try to do that one because usually I'm
Yeah.
looting, so I have a lot of stuff on me. Um, Couple of the debuffs on the crate that you can pick up from the airdrop. One is to make that crate heavier. So that means when you pick it up,
Yeah.
your stamina is going to go quicker because it's extra heavy. And another is it can be radiated, so you can have an irradiated crate, meaning that it's going to be the same as if the timer had just gone off for the match and the radiation's coming. You're going to start taking damage from this crate, and so the longer you're in the match with this crate, the more damage you're going to take. So if that's happening, then yeah, you want to if you pick up the crate and it's irradiated, you definitely want to get to an exit as quickly as possible, just to avoid dying for any other reason, just because of the extra damage you're taking.
Yep.
Okay,
Um,
I think we've talked about almost everything.
Pretty much. Yeah, because gun wise, we kind of already mentioned, what are
Yeah.
some good starting guns. The M16 or ES16, AKM, the M2 carbine on single fire has pretty much no recoil.
hmm
Um,
Yeah, there's a
you
few
want,
guns you want to use on single fire. The M2 carbine, the VZ58 on full auto is a nightmare, but if you're using it on
yeah,
single fire, it's really good. The Gewehr 3, um, it's another one where you're using it on single fire. It's a really good gun. So that's just something. If you find that a gun's really hard to control on auto fire, try it on single fire. And you might think, oh, well, single fire it's not going to be as good, but they do a lot of damage. So and you can still pump your trigger as fast as you can, and you won't have as much recoil as if you were using it on full auto. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And again, it's like you have a shooting range at your shelter, you have unlimited ammo there, so you can literally shoot for hours on end and find a gun that works for you
hmm
early on, um, and definitely do that. Like find something that works for you
Yeah.
because early on AKM worked for me, but it may not work for you. Uh, you know, so
hmm
you basically want to find something, uh, that you're comfortable with for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. The scarecrows in your shelter, like in the shooting range, approximate the same health as a outlander in the game. So they'll take the same amount of damage. So a headshot on a scarecrow will usually kill a scarecrow right away, and it'll be the same if you could do a headshot on an outlander in an encounter. So yeah, the shooting range is great. As long as you have a gun in your inventory, you can put it on your backpack, go into the shooting range, and use it. If you um, otherwise, there's also these things called shooting range challenges, and it's in your shooting range. They only unlock if you've brought back at least one gun. But they're another good way of doing shooting range, um, doing different types of shooting, is because these little challenges, these little awarded challenges or whatever, um, they have different things. Like there'll be like shoot so many scarecrows, and they'll be in different locations than they are normally. There'll be moving targets that you could try to aim and shoot and get as quickly as you can. There'll be like shoot the bottles as quickly as you can, that kind of thing. So the shooting range challenges are really can be really helpful too, to get you some different experience than just doing the standard shooting range that's always static, always looks the same.
Yeah. And sometimes you get daily challenges that will include
Yeah,
completing uh, the shooting range ones.
yeah,
So, uh, and you get crates or some kind of reward from completing those. Um, I guess the only other thing too for newer players would be maybe to mention Shootout, because
mm-hmm.
Shootout is a different game mode than your standard encounter, which is a death match essentially. And if you finish in the top three, unless the lobby is boosted, if you finish in the top three, you get shootout crates, and in that case, you get. We talked about it on episode 2 of our podcast. You get a lot of goodies that could help with your shelter upgrades.
Yeah,
Um,
you can get additional
so I would,
crates, special outfits that you can't get normally.
yeah, and another good thing about shootout as well is you get to use any gun that you find within the game itself, and it's a good practice because
Mm-hmm.
you're not just shooting at scarecrows, and you're actually shooting against other players.
Who are
So
shooting back.
you
Yeah,
yeah, they're shooting back.
yeah.
The scarecrow's not going to shoot at you,
Yeah.
but um,
And the shootout's kind of neat because you don't take anything in with you. So like even though you might have a loadout before you go into shootout, that loadout stays behind. You're going in with nothing. You'll
yeah,
start with a random weapon, and it's going to be
yeah,
typically a common weapon. Sometimes
yeah,
it's something better, but usually it's a common weapon. But you can find better weapons as you're playing the shootout, which you'll lose if you die, and then you'll start with a common weapon again. Because in shootout, if you die, it's not over. It's pretty much a time limit. I think it's like a 10-minute or something like that match, and you're trying to get as many kills as you can. So if you get
yeah,
killed, you'll respawn after a few seconds, and then you go again until it gets to a certain point and it says you've entered final mode, and then
yeah,
whoever is the top player will get the most crates, and then the top 3 players will get shootout crates.
yeah,
And if it's been boosted, additional players will get crates as well.
yeah. It's 3 crates for first, 2 for second, and 1 for third. And then if it's ever boosted, it's a single crate for each additional boost. Um,
Yeah, and there's up to 8 players. Was it 8 or yeah, to 8 players in a shootout.
yeah,
And
yeah. They
there's
they
yeah,
actually removed it because it used to be 10 and there was lag issues, and they reduced it to up to 8 players. And now there's still some lag issues sometimes, but it's definitely nowhere near as bad as what it used to be.
yeah. And there's one other mode called Eliminations, and that's where 2 teams of 5 will go in, and it's the first to win 5 matches. So it's like you start on the map, everyone starts with the same weapon. Each time it's a random weapon, but you'll start with a random weapon. Everybody on the map's using the same weapon, and you're sort of like going from 2 different sides, trying to shoot each other. And then about halfway through, a capture the flag element starts up. So if one of the teams captures the flag, they can win, or you eliminate the other side, then you win. And then the first team to get 5 wins wins the eliminations. So
Yeah.
yeah,
The rewards aren't as good in eliminations as it is in shootout, but
But it is a way
They
to play
may,
with 5 friends. Like you can have a team of
yes,
5 friends. That's the only way to have up to 5 people on a team is to do eliminations.
yeah, and again, it's a good way to learn new weapons because
Yeah.
in eliminations everyone's given the same weapon for each round. So they may not be guns that you're used to using, but you get to use them against live targets. So
And sometimes it can even be the crossbow.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
the infamous crossbow. And most of the time, if it is a crossbow, I'm going to try to melee people to death.
Yeah. The crossbow's really hard to use.
Ex-
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Um, but yeah, I think that's a good place to stop it for this episode. I think we've covered pretty much everything
Yep.
for new players. So again, welcome to Vigor. We hope you enjoy it, and if you like the video, please like and subscribe. Obviously, if it's a video, you're watching this on YouTube. But we also have an audio only version, which is going to be available on all podcast players. So, however you're watching or listening to us, welcome, and we hope to see you in the Outlands. Again, I'm Dr. Anton,
And I'm DJ Spencer.
and thank you for listening. Have a great night. Take care.
Yep. Bye.